In the tradition of Malcolm X, peace be unto you. Day to day, life in any city, like Oakland, California, can appear to be stable and unchanging. On the surface, people and places we know seem to be reliable indicators that our lives will be pretty much the same from day to day. But everything around us is changing, and we can see that happening throughout the world. Nations which once existed just 15 years ago are in shambles now. We usually don't see the slight or nuanced changes taking place around us. The problem is we see what we want to see. But beneath the veneer created by what we want to see, our perceptions, are the objective changes that are indeed taking place all around us. Look at these pictures. I lived in Oakland for most of my life, and I can tell you that never before, this time, have people been forced to live on the streets of the city with rats and cats and wild dogs. The increasing numbers of homeless people in the city are like a slowly rising tide of extremely impoverished people. These homeless people are a sign of what is here and increasing at an increasing rate. First, their tent villages are set up near the waterfronts or in areas where their mothers, fathers, and grandparents lived 70 years ago when they first came to Oakland looking for a better life. Second, they are powerless people. They cannot stop the social, political, and economic forces which are pushing them into the streets in ever-increasing numbers and consisting of all ages, children, young adults, middle-aged adults, and the elderly. Third, they are a sign of increasing social chaos, which is coming to Oakland and other cities throughout the United States faster than we thought. Now look at this picture. It is a picture of the effects on the Bay Area of increasing worldwide sea level rise. 99% of credible scientists from all fields agree that climate change is happening. We are in the midst of a growing crisis, and the Bay Area and Oakland in particular will suffer extreme consequences because of climate change. On the map, can you see Oakland? The blue areas are the new shoreline of the bay as the Pacific Ocean level rises. In part, it is happening because of the kind of economy and technology we have been using for thousands of years, but increasingly so over the past 200 years. That technology has set in motion an accelerated degradation of the environment that we all depend upon. And the changes that are being made for us will be insurmountable challenges. No challenge we as a people have ever faced since the advent of slavery will stress us as much as this new challenge called climate change. Poor people in Oakland will suffer the most, and descendants of slaves will suffer most of all. Now here's a picture I've shown you before. This picture is a picture of the square of opposition. Descendants of slaves, like everyone else and every animal on this planet and every plant on this planet, live on the square. At every moment, we contend with thousands of unseen forces pushing or pulling us toward one of four corners, either by our desire, by our appetite, or by our fear. Our problem is that we have no power. We have no economic power. We have no political power. And we have no leadership with foresight. We are the least likely to meet and overcome the immediate challenges posed by climate change in the Bay Area for those reasons. Now, for that reason, here in Oakland and throughout the state of California and the nation, we, descendants of slaves, are being thrown under the bus. We are least likely to have sufficient aid that will enable us to sustain ourselves during these coming crises. And there is nowhere to go, because even Africa is sinking into a state of uninhabitability. So we cannot say or think, well, I'll go back to Africa. Even Africans are trying to leave Africa. The global and national and local power elite have now defined us as an expendable people, because we are no longer useful to them to grow wealth for them in their capitalist society, a society based solely upon the exploitation of others, a society based upon the Constitution, which is predicated on the principle of inequality, not equality. Other ethnic groups have replaced us, including African immigrants, because they are useful at this time to white supremacists. At the same time, descendants of slaves are at their weakest social, political, and economic condition in 100 years. And you may ask, well, why? And the answer is complex. There are many reasons for that, but there are major reasons. But since 2016, keep this in mind. In the United States, generally, national fertility rates have fallen to a record low for a second straight year. And let me quote from the report. The fertility rate dropped for blacks about 11%, end quote. Human biological reproduction is an unconsciously driven process, a process by means of which a population replaces impaired, dying, or dead members over time, just as our cells are repaired or replaced at night when we sleep. If those repairs and replacements do not take place, the body degrades, and eventually entropy builds up in the body and we die. Scholars, historians, social scientists have written on what drives societal collapse. In a famous paper written by Harvey West and Raymond Bradley in the journal Science, they made it clear that there are conditions which set in motion the decline of whole populations. When groups have too many incompetent members, poor or no methods, that is, strategies or tactics for growth, no useful materials, no technology or equipment they can use to access values they need to survive, then they don't do very well on the square of opposition. Time is running out for descendants of slaves if we do not organize collectively and find new ways of unifying ourselves so that we stand a better chance of surviving. How chaotic will it get? The Department of Defense released a report last year entitled "At Our Own Peril." In that report, they stated that in the coming decades, violent or disruptive dissolution of political cohesion and identity will take place in the United States of America. And we're beginning to see growing cracks in the structure of American society as the power elite fight amongst one another for control of the instruments of political and economic power. Now, here is a picture which shows you the heat dome over the United States on July 16th. Records throughout the United States, heat records, were set as temperatures have soared higher than ever before. And here is a picture of July 16th, giving you a global bird's eye view of the increasing heat problems faced by nations all over the world. If you look at the top, you'll see Russia in a heat wave. You'll see Africa extremely hot as the Sahara Desert moves southward. And as it moves southward, it will dry up lakes like Lake Chad and other rivers, causing famine to increase in Africa, and of course, causing Africans to find their way off the continent and into other countries where they may find shelter. This graph shows you the rise in temperatures. And you can see the arrow that I have put there so that you can see the line that was crossed many years ago, demonstrating that we are on a perilous path of increasing temperatures that will eventually make life unsustainable in the United States, particularly the Southwest and California and Florida, and of course the southern states first. Here's a picture of the ex-governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you can see that he's pointing to all of the areas colored blue where the ocean waters will inundate land around the periphery of the Bay Area. Now, politicians and scientists have known that this was going to happen for 20 years, but it was not released to the public for many reasons, primarily to prevent people from knowing where not to buy real estate. This is a line of telephone poles. The average telephone pole is about 40 feet high. I have put this picture here so that you can estimate, get a visual of how high sea levels will rise over the next 50 or 60 years, but increasingly so even in your lifetime. In the past, sea level has risen, in some instances, 400 feet. That would be 10 of these telephone poles stacked on top of one another. Here is another map of the Bay Area, and you can see Oakland, you can see Lake Merritt to your right, and you can see the blue seawater, that's salt water encircling Lake Merritt. Here we have a picture of the increasing inundation of the East Bay, and there's the city of Hayward. And this would be the San Mateo Bridge that you can see. And of course, there is a college there that obviously based upon this projection will be inundated. And you can see how far the water line is intruding even up past Highway 880. Here's another picture which gives us an idea of the water line going down into San Jose, Fremont, and in the South Bay area. And of course, this takes us up into Vallejo, and we can see how the water line, remember the water line, the new water line is typified or characterized by the color blue. And you can see it around Vallejo to the west, and you can see it to the east. And here's a picture of the San Francisco Bay Area, and you can see the blue has inundated San Francisco Airport and many other very important areas of the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, this map that I'm showing you now shows you the water inundation in Sacramento. So there's the city of Sacramento, and you can see here that salt water has inundated this area. And keep in mind that that salt water will seep down into aquifers where we have fresh water that has virtually been there for millions of years. And that, of course, will prevent the use of the aquifers for agricultural purposes in the San Joaquin Valley area, where 90%, let me repeat that, 90% of our vegetables are grown, that 90% of the vegetables used in the United States. And I've put this so that you can get an idea of the biomass on this planet. And you can see, if you look at the green squares represent the biomass of all wild animals compared to cattle, pigs, goats, and sheep. And as this graph demonstrates, we have so reduced the diversity of life on this planet that when we are unable to cultivate the grain crops which we use to feed cattle, pigs, and other animals, then we will be very, very much unable to sustain ourselves with protein. And keep in mind that the oceans will be adversely affected as well, eliminating seafood as a source of protein for many millions and millions of people on this planet. Again, I want to remind you that time is running out. And the key word for Descendants of Slaves is collectivism, the idea that working together in small groups, let me repeat, in small groups, can and will facilitate our survival, not large groups. I am not advocating that you join a large organization of any kind for a variety of reasons. First, because they're very exploitative, they're hierarchical, and secondly, because the government has infiltrated every so-called black organization in the United States. And every large church and every masjid is totally infiltrated, as was the case back during the days of COINTELPRO. And so they will frustrate the purpose of any people in any large organization to organize in a way that will be beneficial to descendants of slaves. We must, or we should, organize into small groups. For example, groups no larger than 5 families. 5 families working collectively to sustain one another during these times of trouble. Those types of groups will be virtually immune from being penetrated by the government. And if we do not find these new ways to organize and do so, then we will suffer what many other ethnic groups have suffered on this planet, and that is total annihilation, extinction. We will not be able to sustain ourselves through the duration of this century. Do not take it lightly. Climate change is the most serious challenge facing humanity in over 15,000 years. I am Dr. Stephen Nur Ahmed. Peace be unto you.